Hey guys, Dr. Michael Young here again. Welcome back to BA115. This is our first lesson. What I'm going to try to do for each of our lessons is I'm going to go through the material. I'm not going to cover everything because it's a ton of material. What I'm going to do is I'm going to be picky. Maybe I'm cheating, but I'm going to pick the stuff that I think is interesting. Some of it I think is figure out on your own. I'm going to pick out a few things that are interesting and make some comment and try to bring the material to life. Because remember, our objective here is to try to get you interested in a business career. So yeah, I've been doing this for a long time, and so I've got a lot of insights and things that I can say about how things have evolved over the years. So I'm going to just touch on some of that as we go along. Right, let's get this started then. So let's get this puppy started. As I mentioned in the introduction video, I'm assuming that you guys are interested in a business career of some sort, or at least you think you are. So what we're going to do in this course is we're going to talk about business. This is a very broad course. We don't get very deep into anything, but we cover a lot of material. And a lot of people want a business career. In fact, you might be aware that we have more business majors than any other type of major on the campus of West Virginia State University. That's not to say that there's anything wrong with any of the other majors. It's just that it's a popular choice because of the breadth and the depth of careers that are available in business. Right. We're going to try to give you an idea of a little taste of what that's like. First question I want to ask you, show of hands, how many people in this class come from a business family background? Oh yeah, that's right. This is an online course, so we can't do that. I happen to be from a business family background. I've seen the good and the bad of business. Lots of my relatives, if you look at my father, my brother, my sister's husband, sister's family, all of them are in business. I'm the weirdo in the family that decided to go up, get a PhD, and do something odd, like move to Hong Kong and start a career in international business education. But if you do come from a business family background, you know what I'm talking about. Even if you don't come from a business family background, many people in here, maybe your parents, or you have relatives, or significant others that are working in financial industry, in businesses. Private businesses are the major employers in the state of West Virginia. I mean, if you take the totality. Of course, government is also a huge employer, but if you take the totality, most people work for private businesses. And so you have an idea of what I'm talking about. In this course, whenever we say business, we talk about an organization. Most of the time, we're talking about a for-profit organization. There are non-profit organizations, but they're a different animal. There are some courses on campus that deal specifically with non-profit organizations. We discuss those in this class, but it's usually as a sidebar. When we're talking about businesses, we're talking about organizations that are producing goods and services. Goods are tangible things that you can actually touch. And services are things that you can't touch. Actually, I don't know if you were aware of this, but most businesses in the United States are service businesses. Most people are working in the service industry, although there has been an uptick and there's been an increase in manufacturing as a result of the pandemic. Lots of people that were producing things overseas realized, hey, wait a minute, we better bring that back home in case there's another type of disruption in our supply chain. That and other factors. There have been, the war in Ukraine, the ongoing conflict with China seems to be deepening. All of this means that these political factors also mean that there's more people that were off-sourcing that have now begun on-sourcing that back to the United States. Being in business is very stressful, and it's not easy. If you come from a business family, you know what I'm talking about. Most businesses are out of businesses. Most businesses are out of business within 5 years. And a lot of the businesses that are in business as going concerns is a term that we sometimes use, are not exactly doing great. They're just getting by. But I mean, I don't want that to be discouraging, because there are some businesses that are doing well. Some are doing very well. Businesses that does very well continuously, makes an above normal profit for a long period of time. We say it has a sustainable competitive advantage. And there are actually several businesses in that category as well. So it doesn't mean that you should give up and switch your major right at this moment. Another term that you may have heard of is the term entrepreneur. This is a French word, entrepreneur. It sounds French. Made famous by an Austrian economist by the name of Joseph Schumpeter, who sort of idolized. He's the first one that really said, you know what, we need to give special recognition to this special class of person he called the entrepreneur, because they're the ones that take risk, that break things, that move things forward, and cause our productivity and our living standards to increase. So I'm going to ask you to understand and know that word, entrepreneur, if you haven't already heard it. Here's a question that I hope you already know the answer to, but we're starting off at the very beginning. Blank refers to the total amount of money a business takes in during a given period. Well, we've got profit, loss, revenue, and risk. Well, I think we can quickly eliminate loss. Right? It's money coming in. That's not a loss. We can pretty quickly eliminate risk. I can't think of a situation where we would call money risk. So that leaves profit and revenue. It's not profit, right? Because profit is not just the amount of money that a company takes in. It's subtracting out the costs of doing business. So profit is eliminated, and that leaves us with revenue, which gives us our first set of definitions here. Revenues, profits, and losses. Revenue, total amount. Profit, amount of money business earns above and beyond one expenses, salaries, and expenses. And loss, when the business expenses are more than its revenues. And making revenue be more than total cost is not easy. It's not easy. Again, most businesses don't succeed in doing that when they start. Another thing that you may have heard of people talk about no risk, no gain, no risk, no reward. Some people sometimes talk about the risk-reward trade-off. If you look at investments, for example, the least risky investments are the ones that pay the lowest return. That's kind of true of businesses as well. When you go into business, if you go into a startup, into a high risk area, then you've got a chance of really making it big. You may have heard the term unicorn. No, I'm not talking about a pony with a single horn sticking out of its head that can maybe fly. No, a unicorn is a private business that's one that someone has started up, and it's worth at least $1 billion, but no one has put it on the market, no one has sold it. And so usually people that start these businesses think of them as really big, really filthy rich people. The Mark Zuckerbergs, the Elon Musks, the Bill Gates. Think of the others. These are the guys that took enormous risks, started businesses, but then that risk paid off. But for all of those, there are lots of them that didn't pay off. But anyway, back to this. Make a long story short, trade-off between risk and return. One of the reasons that economists and private business people hold entrepreneurs in such high regard is that new businesses, entrepreneurs, people that introduce new ways of doing things, improve productivity. And by improving productivity, they improve standard of living, and Standard of living refers to how much the amount of goods and services people will buy with money they have. The United States has one of the highest standards of living in the world. All other things equal, salaries are pretty high and prices are fairly low in the United States, which makes our standard of living pretty high. Doesn't mean that our quality of life is the highest in the world. When we look at the quality of life in terms of natural environment, education, our healthcare system, even though we spend more on healthcare than many other countries, you might be aware of this, the average life expectancy is going down, and there are actually some problems with health in the United States right now. Safety, amount of leisure, other things like that, other forms of quality of life. It's different. There's a difference between quality of life and standard of living. Standard of living has to do with the amount of goods and services you can consume. Quality of life is broader, okay? Here's another interesting thing. When I first started teaching business some 30 years ago, we only talked about the owners. We didn't talk about these so-called stakeholders. It was thought that businesses were in the business of making money. Some of you may remember or maybe have seen, you don't remember because it was before you were born, but it was a movie in the 1980s starring Michael Douglas and Charlie Sheen. It was called Wall Street. And a famous line from that movie is, "Greed is good," right? And there was another quote from chairman of General Motors in the 1950s. He said, "What's good for General Motors is good for the United States." The idea was that we make profits first. We look out for our owners. If we do that, then everything else will fall in place. But times change. We've taken a broader perspective of what a for-profit business, a typical U.S. business, has as its constituency, you might say. And we now call this the stakeholder view. Stakeholders do include the owners, but also include the customers, surrounding community, environmentalists, other retailers, employers, government leaders, suppliers, media, bankers. So it's a much broader view, and this is referred to as the stakeholder view of business. Some of you may hope to become entrepreneurs. I've had students before that have gone on and started their own business. Being an entrepreneur is both good and bad. We tend to glamorize entrepreneurs. They have freedom. They make their own decisions. They're their own boss. When you work for yourself and you're not just making a salary, hey, the sky's the limit. It's not like a salary where your income is going to be fixed to where it is. It depends on how well the business does, how well you do. Problems with that. I have a neighbor who, well, I'm sure you do too. You know people that are working in business that have become entrepreneurs. Many of them are happy. Many of them are happy with that choice, and some of them don't regret it, but then you hear them complain. It's not like having a salary where you just go in and, when you go home in the evening, your time is your own. There are no paid vacations. Typically, there's no health insurance. These are some of the problems with being an entrepreneur. Another quick little thing I want to talk about is, hey, what do we have to work with? Well, as a business, we're talking about for-profit business. We're talking about making goods and services, trying to make a profit. What are we doing? We're taking land. Land refers to all natural resources, not just real estate, but also petroleum, wood, water resources, all that is considered land. Labor, any type of human resources, capital, machinery, in other words. Entrepreneurship. This is the creativity, that little special ingredients that is so critical in a for-profit economy, making things happen. And here's a new one. When I first started teaching this course, we weren't talking about this thing called knowledge, but now, in the day of the internet, where so much information is out there, We talk about big data, we talk about artificial intelligence, we talk about all of these factors that are changing very quickly. We have a fifth category. We've created a fifth factor of production. We're calling that one knowledge. When you take BA 301, Management and Organization, we're going to talk about this in more detail. We're going to talk about the environment. And when we talk about the environment, yes, it includes what we normally think of as the environment, the natural environment, but it also includes everything else. For example, economic and legal environment. The economic and legal environment includes things like freedom of ownership, contract law, corruption. Corruption is a big factor. Believe it or not, the United States, we have a lot of corruption in the United States, of course, but it's not as bad in the United States as it is in some of the other, what we call emerging economies. The currency, what's happening globally, and taxes and regulation. This is always a big factor. When it comes around politics and election time, people talking about taxes and regulation is one of the things that influences business. This is a big one these days. The competitive environment. There's a big push right now for businesses to manage and create a culture in which they can retain customers. And there's a big push, there's a big tug of war happening between workers and bosses about coming back from homework and coming back to the office. I know my son is involved in a tug of war. His company wants him to come back to work. Most of the workers would rather work from home. And so it's kind of a standoff in a lot of ways. But that's something that it's a competitive environment, that part of the competitive environment that firms need to talk to deal with in making profits. When we talk about human resource management later on, we'll spend more time talking about why this is a big problem. Next one, the social environment. Diversity is a big thing. Diversity is a huge thing right now. We know that workforce is changing. The demographics are changing in terms of age, in terms of sexual orientation, in terms of ethnicity. All of these things are part of this bigger push for diversity, equity, and inclusion, DEI. Not without controversy, of course. It comes up in all the political campaigns. But regardless, it's something that we have to deal with. It's a fact. It's a fact that we have to deal with this. And diversity can either be a good thing or a bad thing from management's perspective. It should be a good thing, right? We should be able to tap into it, because if we have diverse viewpoints, diverse ways of approaching things, that should make our organization more dynamic. Big one now is technical environment. Oh my gosh. AI. Can you pick up a not pick up a newspaper. Nobody picks up a newspaper anymore. Can you click on a news story these days without seeing something about artificial intelligence? ChatGPT, right? And how, I was reading the other day where a woman checked on Amazon.com, someone was using AI to write fake books and sell them under her name. And just today I was reading on Drudge Report, which is one of the news sites that I go to, talking about how newsrooms are going to be doing without reporters, and we're going to have a humanless newsroom because of artificial intelligence, big data, barcodes, the internet. This is all part of the reason that we have that fifth factor of production. All right, so when we're talking about the environment, we're usually talking about global business environment, quality imperative, free trade, global competition, all these factors. We can break it up into these 4 different categories. Personally, one of the things that I find most interesting about business, or about the planet Earth, really, is that there are huge differences across countries. And I've spent a lot of my research. If you go and look at my CV, which is online, you'll see that a lot of my research is in the area of, of comparative management, comparative business, for example. So, right. So yeah, so I hope that was useful. I'm going to try to do this for each of our topics. Again, I'm not covering everything. I'm just trying to touch along. I've gone through the PowerPoint files. I've gone through the material, picked out a few things that I think are interesting, and tried to bring them to life a little bit with some stories, some anecdotes, maybe a joke or two to make it, more interesting for you. So yeah, until next time, happy studies.